Hello, we're here today to talk about one of the world's best-known weapons, the RPG-7. But before we get into the history of this rocket launcher, or more precisely, rocket-propelled grenade launcher, but we'll come back to the terminology shortly, I'd like to thank the Musée de la Cavalerie in Saumur for allowing me to present this RPG-7 to you, so don't hesitate to pay them a visit if you're in the area, and you can also check out their website in the description. A big thank you also to my patrons who allow me to continue my work, so don't hesitate to join them either if you can. This RPG-7 is undoubtedly one of the most famous weapons due to its widespread use in various armed conflicts, some of which are still going on today. This weapon has been in use since the 60s, but first we'll talk about its development, which dates back to the last world conflict. The USSR, like most of the belligerents, whether Germany, Great Britain, or the United States, had begun research into a portable anti-tank weapon. Projects for weapons using shaped charges had begun in the 30s, but never came to fruition. In 1942, the RPG-82 rocket launcher was finalized and adopted 2 years later. However, the weapon was far too cumbersome, weighing in at 38 kilos and measuring just over 2 meters in length. What's more, it had to be moved on a wheeled carriage. But what really launched the RPG series was the German Panzerfaust. It served as a kind of inspiration for Soviet engineers. The USSR didn't copy the German weapon literally, as RPGs were intended to be reusable weapons, unlike the Panzerfaust. However, the Soviets drew inspiration from part of the Panzerfaust mechanism and from plans for the Panzerfaust 250, which were under development. This gave birth to the first RPG, LPG-44, then RPG-1 in 1945. It's a simple, lightweight launcher, but will soon be discontinued because of its short range and the lack of power of its PG-1 projectile. 1948 saw the launch of the RPG-2, much closer to our RPG-7, which will be used by the USSR, of course, but also by China, Vietnam, and North Korea. Then in the 50s, the USSR sought to modernize its RPG-2 to increase its range and accuracy. As is often the case in the arms industry, two projects were carried out in parallel. On one side was the RPG-4, on the other the RPG-7. In the end, it was engineer Firulin's RPG-7 with its PG-7-shaped charge projectile that was adopted in 1961. You'll have noticed that I've skipped RPG-3, 5, and 6. For RPG-3 and 5, there's very little information on them, and it seems that RPG-3 and 5 were projects on paper, but didn't reach the prototype stage. As for RPG-6, that's another story. We deliberately skipped the name RPG-6 as there was already a World War II anti-tank grenade with that name. But back to our RPG-7, which will be mass-produced by the Soviet Union and also by other countries. Some will manufacture it under license, while others will reverse engineer copies. Thus, China, Egypt, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, Vietnam, and many Eastern European countries will manufacture RPG-7s or their copies. These weapons have been used in every conflict since their introduction and are still in use today. The strong points of this weapon are its ease of use and versatility, as dozens of different grenades have been designed so that these weapons can be used against armored vehicles, which was their initial role, but also as anti-personnel or against bunkers with the development of thermobaric ammunition. And during the Vietnam War, North Vietnamese forces also used these weapons against helicopters, although the projectile was not guided. What they did was to join forces with different RPGs to ambush American aircrafts. In 1968, a version for paratroopers was adopted with the RPG-7D. The main feature of this variant is its ability to be disassembled into two parts to make the launcher more compact. In the 70s, the RPG-7 was further modernized with the RPG-7V, which could be fitted with an infrared scope, and then the RPG-7V2, which is still marketed today. The USA also designed a version known as the PSRL, which was developed by Airtronic in 2009. It's a slightly modernized version with Picatinny rails on the side, and these American RPGs are not intended to equip the American Army, but rather to be exported to countries that already have stocks of ammunition intended for RPG-7s, as the American weapon remains compatible with older projectiles. Given the number of variants produced, it's difficult to know the precise number of RPG-7s manufactured since 1958, but it's quite possible that over 10 million of these weapons have been produced. And now let's take a closer look at this RPG-7 to better understand how it works. The RPG-7 consists firstly of the launcher, which measures 95 centimeters and weighs 6.3 kilos. Then there's the projectile, in this case a PG-7S grenade. The most widely produced projectile is the PG-7M ammunition, which is the most widely produced variant, having been in production since 1969. The way in which the RPG-7 works is quite interesting, since propulsion takes place in two stages. Firstly, the propellant charge contained in the base of the munition is fired. For this initial firing, the weapon works like a recoilless grenade launcher, a concept similar to that of the Panzerfaust. Once the projectile is out of the tube, a rocket motor takes over. You can see the different nozzles here. And when the projectile exits, two pairs of fins will automatically deploy to stabilize the projectile. This first firing will be done in the classic way, as there is in fact a primer at the base of the ammunition, which is located here, and this primer will be activated by a firing pin as on a standard firearm. To prepare for firing, we'll obviously insert the ammunition, which will be indexed by this little notch at the front of the tube. You can then deactivate the safety and you have a hammer, which needs to be cocked. And here we can see our firing pin here. To fire, we release the hammer, which will strike the firing in and starts the launching process. To fire, place the launcher on your shoulder and grab the two vertical handles. Incidentally, the second vertical handle is only found on RPG-7, as its predecessors lacked one. Sighting is via folding sights or via the PG-07 optic with its 2.7 times magnification. The PG-07's reticle acts as a rangefinder for judging distances, with a sort of table engraved on the optics to compensate for the trajectory of different ammunition. At the rear, we can see the famous cone at the back of the tube to dissipate the propulsion gases, and when firing, we have to make sure that there's no one behind in a zone of around 10 meters. One of the big advantages of this weapon is its ammunition versatility. Unlike a conventional rocket launcher, whose warhead must absolutely have the same diameter as the tube, the RPG is different. The only diameter constraint is for the propellant charge. The warhead, on the other hand, can vary as it is located at the front of the tube. As a result, there's a huge variety of ammunition, from shaped charge ammunition, some in tandem, like the PG-7VR, to fragmentation charges with the OG-7V, and thermobaric charges with the TBG-7V. There are dozens of different types of ammunition, and you can even find a kind of adapter to fire a 7.62 by 39 cartridge for training purposes. This pseudo-rocket is known as the PUS-7 device. In itself, the RPG-7 mechanism is very simple, as it is technically a single-action weapon. We have our hammer and firing pin here. When we pull the trigger, we lift the sear here and the hammer strikes the firing pin under spring pressure. The propellant charge is then triggered and the projectile exits the tube. Once out, the fins will deploy and the motor will engage. On ammunition such as the PG-7M or PG-7S, the explosion occurs on contact, and if no contact is made for around 5 seconds, the rocket self-destructs. The maximum range of these RPG-7s is around 700 meters, but the practical range is around 300 meters. Although the RPG-7 cannot compete with modern rocket launchers with guided projectiles, it is nonetheless an extremely effective weapon. It's a simple, easy-to-use weapon, and thanks to its variety of ammunition, it can be used in a wide range of conditions. Its low cost and ease of maintenance are part of the reason why these weapons are still so widely used, and it's a safe bet that these RPGs will continue to be used for many years to come. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd like to thank the Musée de la Cavalerie for entrusting me with this RPG-7, so please feel free to visit them. I also invite you to subscribe to the channel and support my work through Tipeee. On that note, see you soon for a new video.